While Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar continue to suffer from persecution and human rights abuses, media reports say that extremist Buddhists have laid siege to parts of Rakhine state where the Rohingyas reside. But officials are turning a blind eye to the persecution of the minority group. Now, to make matters worse, the army and police have raided several houses and abducted dozens of Muslims, including women. And there are reports of sexual abuse of female hostages. Although international organizations have failed to take action against the abuse of Rohingyas, the pressure from Muslim countries has faced Myanmar's president to promise to end the violence during his speech at the UN General Assembly. Well, we're going to switch over to London, joined by Reza Kazim from the Islam Human Rights Commission. Thank you so much for being with us. Let's look at it in general. Why do you think that it is continuing, although there has been pressure, especially from the Muslim nations and communities? In some cases, it almost seems as if the government there, though in Myanmar, is not really paying a whole lot of attention to it.
That's right, and the problem has been that people are turning a blind eye to what's actually going on. The powers that be, the focus of the media and so on, has been very much different in terms of the way that people are looking at this. And I think one of the problems has been the way that Aung San Suu Kyi was actually made into a darling of the West, paraded around Western capitals, and seen as if all the problems in Myanmar have gone away because she has been freed, when in fact her own narrative against the Rohingya Muslims was in itself quite worrying in terms of some of the parallels that you see with nationalist movements which are not particularly take into account the rights of minorities. And when you have a leader, so-called democratic leader, whose attitude is more nationalistic than actually recognizing that there are people, all people need to have rights, then that becomes a problem. And, what's happened is that as a result of that, people in the West are thinking that this is something, the problem there is in the process of going away, when in fact it's being exacerbated and become a lot worse because of her attitude.
Oh, what do you think? Now, you're representing the Islamic Human Rights Commission in London. What do you think needs to be done in order to put the pressure on the government there in order to get results for these Muslims?
I think we need to look at how, what bearing and what influence, China in particular, who has had a relationship in the past, what kind of pressure can be brought to bear from that side? I think there's also pressure that needs to be brought to bear on the idea of continuing to make sure that we that boycott and sanctions against the Myanmar government continue. Is something that needs to be continue to be in that kind of narrative.
What about the amount of media attention or the lack thereof, especially in the corporate media? What do you see behind this? Because especially in the West, very short-term memory, that if it's not being repeated constantly, it's almost as if it no longer exists. Why do you see what is happening? What's the reason you give?
I think it's about an agenda that it's an issue about resources. Partially, it's to do with resources. It's about making sure that the resources that the Western governments will then have access to as a result of recognizing the government as it currently exists will give it favorable treatment in terms of having access to those resources. And that's one of the fundamental problems. That's the agenda of the government. And unfortunately, media organizations are following the lines of the Western governments rather than actually critiquing it and analyzing the reasons for the stances that the governments have taken. You know, when we talk about having a media that will question and see what the issues are with the stances that governments have taken, we don't see that independence actually being carried out in terms of what is the responsibility of the media in those in the different Western countries. And that problem is quite embedded within the culture of the media, and it's something that if they're not going to be on message with, then they're going to be brought to book. And it's something that is continuing, and that's what you see as a result of this: a lack of independent scrutiny of the actions of the Western governments with regards to this particular case.
Okay, we can only hope that it all turns around. Thank you so much for being with us from the Islamic Human Rights Commission, Mr. Reza Karim from London. Mr. Reza Kazim from London.